do quickly want to thank Beyond the Page, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Madison Community Foundation for making Inga's virtual visit possible. I am absolutely delighted to be welcoming Inga Witscher of PBS's Around the Farm Table for this virtual demo. Take it away, Inga.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Everybody, okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. My name is Inga Witscher. I'm a fourth-generation dairy farmer, milking cows and making cheese on my small farm here in Wisconsin. I also co-created with my father and host the PBS series Around the Farm Table. The series focuses on highlighting these amazing Wisconsin farmers doing all kinds of different things like growing pumpkin seeds to growing pumpkins to press into pumpkin seed oil, growing beautiful flowers, growing all kinds of different heritage meats and heirloom vegetables. Wisconsin is really an amazing state for food, and we're so lucky to be able to have so much access to local, high-quality ingredients. And that's what inspired my father and I to create the series Around the Farm Table. It's a little bit cooking show, a lot bit farming show, and we're so delighted to bring it to Wisconsin and also about 36 other states in the nation. So we're excited to also just really showcase Wisconsin to everyone else. I have been living here in Wisconsin for 15 years on my small dairy farm. I never thought I'd ever end up in Wisconsin. I grew up on my parents' dairy farm in Washington State. My parents milked about 80 cows an hour north of Seattle. And when I was a little girl, I would run around on the farm having a great time, but I never thought I would ever end up being a farmer. I actually really wanted to be a hairdresser, but it wasn't meant to be. And I flunked out of beauty school. So plan B was to become a dairy farmer. 20 years ago, I moved to the West Coast or to the East Coast, and I started learning how to make cheese there. And that really kind of set off this delight of wanting to be closer to my food, wanting to be closer to the farm. So 15 years ago, I made the move to central Wisconsin to start my own dairy farm. And after a few years, I started making cheese on my dairy. So it's been a wonderful experience for me. And I love sharing that with you on our program Around the Farm Table. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to make one of my new fall favorites. This is a recipe I'm going to be making all fall. I suppose we're almost into winter now, but I'm going to be serving it at the holiday season, and I think you're going to be wanting to serve it too. It's called a potato, cheddar, and bacon galette or a tart, and it is as delicious as it sounds. If you're a health nut, this recipe might not be for you, but I will be adding a little bit of kale. Let's get started here. I've got a little bit of olive oil in my pan, and my cast iron skillet is heating up. Let's see. So for this recipe, it's really simple ingredients, and that's why you want to use the best ingredients possible. So we're going to start with 1 onion. I got this at the farmer's market last Saturday. I think it's really important to support those local farmers. When you're buying those local ingredients, you're not only putting your dollars back into that local community, you're supporting these farmers who are really caring about the soil and supporting the soil by amending it with healthy compost and treating it with the respect it needs to be treated with, because without healthy soils, we really can't have healthy people. So take 1 white onion, and this is about a medium to a small. I really never measure when I'm cooking. When I'm baking, I measure, but when I'm cooking, I like to just sort of measure with my heart. And so if I have a bigger onion, I don't mind, I'll use a bigger onion. If I have a smaller one, that's fine too. When you're cooking, you really want to experiment and do what you think is the correct way to be cooking. So now we're gonna just do a simple dice on this onion. I know my knife skills need some work. Cooking is, I'm a great farming. Cooking, I still need to learn some simple knife skills. And I've been practicing for years, and I still can't do the thing where you make the knuckle and then you start dicing things up. But I'm okay with that. I actually got an email from a woman a few years ago, and she said, I'm really nervous that you're going to cut off one of your fingers when you're cooking because you don't know how to use a knife. But all of the other dairy farmers in my area are missing at least one finger from getting caught in a tractor or manure spreader or something else. So if I lose it, I'll fit right in with the rest of the neighborhood. So I've got my 1 onion diced up, and I'm going to set that off to the side while I get my garlic ready. If you've never planted garlic before, it is something that I think you should be planting right now. If you've got some time this weekend, head out to a farmer's market today, grab yourself some garlic, and you can plant it. This is probably the last weekend you'll be able to plant it, but garlic is actually planted in the fall, and it's one of those first things that come up in the springtime. It's really easy to plant. You really should find a reliable source for your seed garlic, but if you find a farmer at the farmer's market and you're able to talk to that farmer about how they're growing their garlic, that's a good garlic to be buying. You take your garlic clove and you plant it with the thin side pointing up, this side down, and I always plant it about 4 inches into the ground, and then I cover it with some mulch and I leave it until spring, and then you'll have garlic year after year. One of the other things I do is I often will grow my garlic next to like lettuces or tomatoes or anything else, because the smell of the garlic growing will keep away any of those nasty little gnats and different insects that might be bothering those vegetables. A good tip when you're gardening is if you eat it together, you should grow it together. So what goes together grows together. So that means like tomatoes and basil, perfect match, right? They also grow really well together. They give each other different benefits as they're growing in the garden. So I'm going to take about 4 cloves of garlic. I love garlic. It is one of my favorite things. And I hate when a recipe just calls for 1 clove of garlic, because it's like, oh, come on, 1 clove? I have to add at least 5. And the easiest thing to do with garlic is just give it a nice big smash with the back of your hand. And then we're going to peel all of this off. And it's already starting to smell delicious here in the house. They should start making scented candles that just smell like garlic and rosemary and olive oil, you know, all that beautiful sort of mise en place that you make before making soups or anything like that. I think it's the best smell in the world. And then I'm just going to do a rough chop on my garlic. If you're cooking with garlic, like say you're making a homemade vinaigrette or, you know, whatever you're doing with garlic, if you chop it up and then let it sit for a few minutes, even 5 minutes, some of those natural all the natural goodness that garlic has will come out in that 5 minutes. So it makes it a little bit healthier when you're eating it. I'm not a doctor, but I love to read about this kind of stuff. And I was recently reading this. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to grab my olive oil from right over here. Sorry about that. The great thing about cooking on television is that at points like that, when I always forget something that's on my cooking table, I'll say, all right, cut, reset. I've got to grab the one thing that I forgot. It happens all the time. I would lose my personality if it wasn't attached to me. So I've got a little olive oil in the pan. Now I'm going to get my onions in there. And my garlic goes in right with it. Love hearing that sound. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some kale. I harvested this just a few minutes ago from my garden. This is a Lacino kale, or a dinosaur kale, it's also called. It has that beautiful flat leaf. This kale is fantastic for using in salads, if you're doing kale salads or kale chips. I recommend this. I also can freeze a lot of this over the course of the summer and the fall, and then I can use it in everything I'm cooking throughout the winter. I love to be able to harvest everything from the summer, whether I'm getting it from my own garden or a neighbor's garden or the farmer's market. And then that way I can be cooking with healthy ingredients all winter long. And it's in the winter when I have more time to be inside cooking soups and stews. In the summertime, we're really busy on the farm, moving cows, milking cows, making cheese, and also making our television series. We just wrapped on the season not too long ago, just a few months ago. We're doing 4 episodes every year now, so we can have a little bit more time to concentrate on getting things done at the farm. If you missed our last episode, you can find it at PBS Wisconsin. The episode is called On Inga's Farm, or something sweet like that. It has a little baby calf, and it'll take you through what's happening on our farm. So I'm going to take out the middle parts, these hard parts of the kale, and I'm going to throw those out to my chickens once we're done here. I love having chickens because I feel bad if I'm throwing away little bits and scraps of pieces of food or bread or anything like that. But with chickens, it's kind of like, oh, I can just put it in there, you throw it out to them and they'll eat it. So it's like a little composting system, and I'm getting some really nutrient manure in return. To farmers, manure is one of the best things. And I bet you've never heard that while watching a cooking presentation before. All right, so I've got all my kale off the stems. One more. I love the color of this kale too. It just looks healthy looking at it. And if you're not a kale fan, don't worry. We're gonna put so much bacon in this recipe that you're never even gonna realize there's kale in it. I just like to put kale in it because it makes me feel a little bit better about eating it. So I'm gonna do a nice rough chop here. I suppose I have a good bunch of kale. Again, I don't really measure things. And I think you should, I love when I read like a British magazine or a British recipe, they're always kind of like, one good glug of this or a handful of this. I like cooking like that. We'll do another pass here of the kale. And then I'm going to pop that right in with my onions and start cooking that back down. All right, clean off my board here. Gonna turn this heat up. Okay, so now to get the rest of the ingredients ready, we're gonna be slicing some potatoes. For this recipe, we're gonna be like shingling the potatoes on our little tart area. And I like to use either like a red potato or like this waxy potato. I wouldn't use a baking potato for this recipe. Potatoes are really great if they're right from the ground. I always grow potatoes every year. And it's fun when people come out in the summertime, if they've never had a potato that's been like freshly dug out of the garden, they just go wild when they're eating it. We actually had our camera crew out and we just boiled some potatoes up for them, put a little butter and salt and pepper on it and served that for lunch. And they couldn't even stand it. They said it tasted so good. They never had potatoes that actually tasted like fresh, earthy potatoes. So if you can find them at your farmer's market or grow them, that's the way to do it. I'll just give my kale a stir. So if you have a mandolin, which is that, slicing thing that always takes off the tips of your fingers, you can use that. I got rid of mine because I felt like there was more bits of finger in the things I was cooking with the mandolin than there was actual ingredients. So I'm just going to use my knife and I'm going to slice my potato pretty thin. We're going to use about 3 or 4 potatoes here, depending on the size of the potatoes. Nice and thin we go. We started doing our show I think we're in our 9th season of Around the Farm Table. We really just wanted to make people aware of what's happening in the food system, how to connect to those local farmers. 1 potato, 2 potato. Give this a toss at the same time here. Look at it, you can just use your knife to stir, and then it's less dishes. We're really just looking to wilt that kale, because this recipe, we're going to bake it for 1 hour, so that kale will cook down more as we're baking it. I think that's good. I'm going to say that's good, and I'm going to turn that off. Slice a few more potatoes. If anyone has any questions along the way, they can put it in the chat. I can't actually see what the questions are. And I have my father running the camera work, and I'm not sure that he can see it either. God bless him. But I'd love to answer any questions. And this recipe will be available at PBS Wisconsin. It's called the Cheddar Bacon Tart. That's probably plenty enough of that. So our next ingredient is an aged cheddar. And I brought with me today my aged cheddar that we make on the farm. This is a classic British style cheddar. We make it with raw milk from our 6 Jersey cows. Jerseys have a higher butter fat than a lot of other cows, and that's what gives it like a really beautiful, creamy texture. And this batch was made on September 28th of 2020. When we make our cheese, we label it with the date it was made, the pasture that the cows were grazing in, the cheese makers, who they are, which is always me and my dad. And then we put that cheese to bed for 1 year. While it ages, it develops those beautiful characteristics of a cheddar. But because it's raw milk, it's a lot more interesting. As the cows graze around our land, they pick up different beneficial microflora on their bodies and on their udders, and that transfers into our cheese. And it's a really good thing. It's kind of like how winemakers will talk about the terroir of their region. With making raw milk cheese, we have that terroir of the farm, and it's a really good thing. I think it makes the cheese extra delicious. And I'm really proud of the cheddar that we've been making on the farm. So I'm going to take a big chunk here. It just smells delicious too. We have a natural rind on our cheese, so you'll see some of these aging spots where the mold's getting through, and that's what's making it really delicious. I'll grate up our cheese. So we started making cheese on the farm in, I guess, 2019. And it's really amazing to be able to milk the cows, graze the cows, be with the cows, and then turn that milk into a product. It's the only downside is I'm always have a lot of cheese on hand, which helps out with my my winter figure that I'm trying to get. Ever since I moved to Wisconsin, I realized this time of the year I got to start packing it on, so I've got enough insulation to get me through winter. There's always farming in winter. It always seems like there's a water line that breaks or something always happens to make life very interesting. And I spend a lot of time outside during the winter. I'm using about 1/2 pound of cheese for this recipe. I know that's quite a bit, but if you have a whole cellar of cheese like I do, it's hardly anything. If you're interested in finding out where to find our cheese is called St. Isidore's Cheddar. And you can find us in Madison at Fromage Nation, right on the square, or at Metcalf Market, the Hilldale location. And if you go in there and you ask for Inga's cheese, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. All righty. So now I'm gonna set my kale mixture aside. Pardon me. You know what? I might just put it right down on here. And we're going to be using this cast iron skillet for the actual tart. I love cooking with cast iron. It reminds me of Like sometimes when I'm on the farm and I'm doing farm chores, like it just reminds me of being with my dad and my grandpa growing up, feeding calves, all the things that we did. Just the little things that I'm doing on the farm just really connects me to that history of my family. And using cast iron skillets connects me to cooking with my grandmother. That's where I really got my start cooking, is being in the kitchen with her, cooking for everyone, all the farm hands at lunchtime, and making fried chicken on Friday nights. She always made the same kind of meal. You know, she had a schedule of what she'd make during the day. So on Fridays, she would make fried chicken in her big cast iron skillet. And then the next morning, she would make us some beautiful pancakes. And it was years before I realized that pancakes should not actually have little pieces of chicken from the night before in them. She would never clean her cast iron skillet. She was one of those never doing that. Don't put soap on it. Don't put water on it. Nothing. Don't touch my cast iron skillet. So when I'm using cast iron, it cooks everything better, but it also helps remind me of those past generations. So now is the fun part. We're going to layer the cast iron skillet with some bacon. When I cook with meat, I really have to know the farmer who's raising those animals. I think meat is something that I need to know that the animals are well cared for. I need to know that they're healthy, what their diet is. It makes the experience so much better. I don't mind paying more for my meat because I don't eat meat every day. So I found this from a friend who raises bacon on her farm. And it's a thicker cut of bacon. And what we're going to do, Dad, if you can get down in this pan, I'm going to show them. We're going to layer this bacon so it kind of creates like a bottom crust. And a lot of deliciousness. I'm going to be serving this recipe on Christmas morning for breakfast. I hope that everyone's coming to breakfast has a healthy heart, because there's a lot of bacon. This is a pound of bacon. And this is really nice because it takes me about 1 hour to milk the cows. And this dish takes 1 hour to bake. So I can make this up ahead of time, even the night before if I wanted to, and then pop it in the oven at 400, go out and milk the cows or open presents with the family or anything like that. And then I can pop it out and serve it at breakfast, probably with a lot of fruit to offset the baconness of it. Okay, so I've got my first layer of bacon there. And now I'm going to take these potatoes and I'm going to shingle them around, creating this wonderful crunchy layer. And that earthiness of the potato kind of helps settle the richness of the bacon. So I've got my 1 layer of potatoes there. I'm going to add a couple of good handfuls of my kale mixture. Looking good. You could use spinach too, or you could leave the green out altogether. But again, I just think it makes it seem a little bit healthier. And that's just really in my mind. All right, now good hunk of cheese. If you are not a fan of cheddar, you could use some nice Swiss cheese, like an Emmentaler would be delicious as well. Experiment is the most fun thing to do. So have fun trying different cheeses. I'm going to cut up a few more potatoes. Might be even fun with a goat cheese in there. If you can come back up on me for a second, Deb. If you're looking for some pork in your area, we just recently interviewed a woman named April Pruja who has Dorothy's Range. She raises some Gloucestershire spot hogs. I think that's how you say. My dad's laughing behind the camera, so it's probably not how you say it. It's something like that. But they're this heritage breed from England, and they've got these like beautiful flappy ears, and they go throughout picking up acorns and just like living a really happy life. And it's great. Like pigs, for example, they're designed to be able to go through orchards and pick up all the fallen apples and eat them and turn them into like really delicious bacon. That's one of the reasons they have those like floppy ears, is to protect their eyes when they're going through the woodlands. Kind of amazing. All right, now another layer of my kale. I'm just going to push that down a little bit. And some really nice cheese. I'm going to serve this to my mom later on, and I'm sure she's going to, she's a kind of a health nut, so I'm not going to tell her what it is. I'm just going to invite her over and let her discover it. Someone asked me once, well, what do I do if I've invited people over for dinner, I'm cooking for them, and they don't like what I'm cooking? And I said, well, never have them over again. If you're going to go through all that trouble of going to the store, getting the ingredients, getting your house clean and cooking, and they don't like it, never have them over again. All right. Okay, so now I've got my other layer of potatoes. I'm just going to do a little salt and pepper on the top. Little salt, pepper. And then we put our potatoes to bed in between pieces of bacon. How good is it? You cannot go wrong with this recipe, really. All right. Look at how cute that is. Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, the only thing I forgot was to put my rosemary in it, but that's all right. I think I'm just going to tuck some rosemary on top of those potatoes. See, this is a great way to cook. You figure it out. If you forget something, you put it in like this, and then it could turn out to be the best thing ever. Okay. Now that goes into the oven at 400 degrees for about 1 hour. Again, you can find this recipe at pbswisconsin.org. And there's also a little video doing the whole thing. So if you want to rewatch, that's the place to do it. Now, after it bakes for an hour, it turns into this nice little tart. My bacon shrunk a little bit on top here with this tart because I used a little bit bigger of a pan for this, but it still tastes heavenly. So now what do you want to serve with your bacon tart for the holidays? How about a really delicious cocktail? Come over here with me. So what I've got going on over here is I took some apples, got them fresh from the farmer's market last weekend, and I've been steeping them in vodka. You can steep them for 4 days, throw 3-4 apples, just cut up into quarters, throw them in the vodka, let it steep for 3-4 days. You could even add a cinnamon stick to that if you wanted to, just to add a little bit of that beautiful apple pie kind of feel. And then if you'd like, you can strain those apples out, get rid of them, and put the vodka back in a mason jar, give it as gifts, or keep it for these fantastic apple martinis. So I've got a little bit of ice in my shaker here. I'm going to add a few ounces of my apple vodka. I've been serving these at Thanksgiving for the last couple of years, and I find it makes my family a lot more interesting. I'm just going to swirl that around some ice just to chill it a little bit. Leave it in there with the ice so that it can get a little bit more chilly. I'm going to take my martini glass, dip it, just the edges, in a little bit of water. Right here, I've got some cinnamon and sugar. And I'm going to put that around the rim of my glass. Come on, attach. There we go. If you wanted to, if you got a lot of people coming over for the holidays, you can set all this out on a table and have people do it themselves. So you've got your rim now. Oh, it smells so good with the cinnamon. And then I'm gonna pour my vodka in there. And then you can take an apple slice. And like I said, you can have this all set out on the table. So as your guests arrive, they can make their own. And then put a nice little apple slice in there with, oh, I hardly used any vodka, with a little bit of a cinnamon stick. And oh my gosh, my family's so much more interesting after just one sip. So there you go. It's really easy, simple, holiday entertaining. You can take that bacon tart, you can serve it for breakfast, you can cut up into pieces, leave it on your appetizer table so people can help themselves. You can even serve it with a little bit of mustard on the side to cut some of that richness. And I think people will be coming back year after year to enjoy the holidays with you. Well, again, you can find this recipe at pbswisconsin.org. Just search Around the Farm Table and it should come up. And you can watch past episodes of our show there. And thank you for gathering with us on this beautiful Saturday. And I hope that next time we can gather in person. Join us all the time around the farm table. I'm your host, Inga Witscher.